The thermometer nailed to the porch of my collapsed cabin read -23 degrees Fahrenheit. But with the wind screaming through the Pine Valley like something that wanted to hurt you, the air felt made of broken glass. My name was Mira Voss, and I was what the Pax called an abomination. An Omega born without a wolf, banished from the Silverblood Pack 4 months ago. Their alpha, Randall, had been very clear on that last morning, his eyes cold as riverstone. Leave before dawn, or I hand you to the hunters. I chose to leave. Now I survived in this abandoned trapper's cabin on the edge of neutral territory, rationing expired canned goods and the occasional charity of nearby human villagers who didn't know what I really was. Enough wood for tonight only, I murmured to myself, breath fogging white in the dark. I bent to pick up a log from the pathetic pile I'd managed to gather before the storm hit. That's when the smell reached me. Not wood smoke, not wet earth. Blood. Fresh, steaming blood in the frozen air, the particular metallic sharpness of wounds that hadn't closed. Against every shred of common sense, I dropped the log. My Omega instincts, usually smothered by fear and isolation, snapped awake. Someone was badly hurt. I pushed through snowdrifts toward the tree line, wind whipping my face raw. I found the first one about 50 meters into the forest. A gray wolf, massive even for a shifter, lying on his side, breath rasping and uneven, coat crusted with ice and dried blood. I dropped to my knees beside him. "Hey," I whispered, voice shaking. "Can you hear me?" He didn't move. Ice was already forming on his muzzle. He was dying from cold. Shifters ran hot, but they weren't invincible. Whatever battle had happened here had drained them entirely. Too depleted to heal, too depleted to hold their own body heat. I looked up. Then I choked back a scream. They were everywhere, scattered through the clearing like fallen soldiers. 11 wolves in total. Brown, gray, tawny, all broken, all barely breathing. I could smell the chemical bite of wolfsbane seeping from their wounds. The poison was blocking their ability to shift back to human form and bleeding away their vital warmth. If I leave them here, they die in less than an hour. I looked at my arms, my very thin, very human arms. I can't move them, I thought. I can't do this. But then I saw him. In the center of the carnage lay a wolf that made the others look like cubs. He was black as the space between stars. His coat so dark it seemed to absorb the moonlight. Even unconscious in the snow, even half dead, he radiated power so absolute it made the air around him feel charged. A deep wound carved across his flank, steaming in the frozen night. And something in me broke. A strange pull ignited in my chest. A vibration I had never felt before, warm and magnetic, like two halves of something clicking together. "I won't let you die," I gritted through clenched teeth. The next 3 hours were the hardest of my life. I ran back to the cabin, grabbed an old tarp I used to cover roof leaks and a coil of rope. No sled. The tarp would have to do. I worked with frantic focus, every muscle in my back and legs screaming. One by one, I wrapped the smaller wolves and dragged them through the snow to my cabin's single room, heaving with everything I had. I was sweating through the cold. My hands bled through my worn gloves. I counted them as I went. 1, 2, 3. By the 10th wolf, my whole body was shaking. But the massive black wolf was still outside. I went back for him last. He was impossibly heavy. When I tried to roll him onto the tarp, he made a low, unconscious sound that vibrated through my chest bones. "I know," I murmured, pressing one hand against his enormous head. "I know it hurts. But if you stay out here, you die. And I don't think you're the kind of wolf who gives up easily." I lashed the rope around my waist, planted my heels in the ice. I pulled. He moved 2 inches. I slipped and hit the snow face first. I got up and pulled again. Centimeter by centimeter, meter by meter, I dragged the enormous beast to the cabin threshold, just as the storm doubled in fury, the wind screaming like something alive. I kicked the door shut and collapsed on the floor, chest heaving. The cabin was the size of a large closet. 11 soaking, bleeding, unconscious wolves occupied almost every inch of floor. The smell of wet fur and wolfsbane was overwhelming. But I didn't rest. I threw every piece of firewood into the stove until the metal glowed orange. I melted snow for warm water. I got to work. I started with the black wolf. Up close, he was terrifying. His paws were the size of dinner plates. I wetted a cloth and began cleaning the wound on his flank. His paw moved. He opened one eye. It wasn't the glassy, unfocused look of a barely conscious animal. It was sharp, lucid, lethal. I froze, hand hovering over his wound. My omega instincts screamed to bare my throat, to submit. Not just to an alpha, but to something beyond that. Something that made the air in the room feel heavy. "I'm helping you," I whispered. "You have wolfsbane in your system. I'm cleaning it out." The black wolf held my gaze for a long, suffocating second. He breathed in slowly, reading my scent. Fear, exhaustion, lavender soap. Then he exhaled, something that might have been a sigh, and closed his eyes. He was letting me continue. I worked through the night, cleaned wounds, forced warm broth down the throats of those who could swallow, burned my own furniture to keep the fire going, an old chair, a broken table leg, just to hold the warmth. At 4 a.m, I finally ran out of strength. I curled up in the only empty space left, just behind the enormous black wolf. He radiated heat like a furnace against the cold draft from the floor. I had no idea who they were. I had no idea that the Silverblood pack who'd banished me was hunting these same wolves for a bounty. I simply closed my eyes and stole warmth from the monster I'd saved. What I didn't know was that the monster was wide awake. Chapter 2. The King Wakes. Kalen Dusk was perfectly conscious. He hadn't moved a muscle, but his senses were screaming. The pain in his flank had dulled to a manageable throb, nothing compared to the wolfsbane that had nearly stopped his heart an hour ago. He kept his breathing steady, playing dead while he assessed. His gamma, Eli, was breathing normally to his left. His beta, Cade, was near the door. All 10 members of his elite guard were alive. The last thing Kalen remembered was the ambush, a trap set by the Northern Alliance using military-grade wolfsbane ammunition, driving them deep into the storm until their failing bodies forced them into wolf form as a last, desperate defense against the cold. They had expected to wake up in hell. Instead, he had woken up in a room that smelled of wood smoke and vanilla. He cracked one eye open. The girl was curled against his back, one small hand gripping his fur. Asleep now, her breathing soft and rhythmic. He scanned the room. The bloodied rags. The empty broth pot. The way his men had been placed nearest the heat source, while she slept on the exposed floor in the draft. She dragged us. This small, underfed creature had dragged 11 adult wolf warriors through a blizzard. Mate, Wood whispered something primitive and undeniable in the deepest part of his mind. His wolf, normally a savage beast that took every ounce of his control to govern, was purring. Actually purring. Just because she was touching him. Kalen needed to shift. He needed to heal. But if he transformed now, a 6'4" naked man appearing suddenly in her living room, it would terrify her to death. Besides, the wolfsbane was still clearing his system. Shifting right now would be agonizing. He would wait. Then the girl sat up sharply, face draining pale. The sound of an engine cut through the wind outside. Chapter 3. The threat, Mira, ran to the window and scraped ice from the glass. "No," she breathed. "No, no, no." She spun toward the wolves. "You have to stay quiet," she said, speaking to them like they couldn't understand. See, because she thought they couldn't. Please, don't move. She grabbed an oversized coat and stepped outside, pulling the door firmly shut behind her. Kalen didn't hesitate. He dragged himself to the door and pressed his ear to the crack beneath it. Well, look at that. A mocking voice outside, the tone of a small man with small power. Still alive, mutt. What do you want, Drake? Mira's voice was barely steady. Alpha Randall sent us on patrol, said the man called Drake. We followed a blood trail. It led to your door. Open up. I was hunting, Mira said. I dragged a deer back. It's a neutral territory. You banned me. You have no right to enter. I have whatever rights I want over a banished Omega. The sound of a heavy boot striking the porch wood. Inside the cabin, Kalen felt his lips pull back. A low growl formed in his chest. Around him, the others were waking up. Eli's eyes found Kalen's immediately. Kalen gave the smallest nod. Get ready. Outside, a dull thud. The sound of a body shoved against a wall. Let go of me. Mira's voice, sharp, frightened. That was enough. Kalen stopped caring about the wolfsbane. He stopped caring about the pain. He hit the door. The old lock disintegrated. The door exploded outward. Drake, a mid-level enforcer of the Silverblood Pack, had Mira pinned against the exterior wall. He looked up. His face went white. Standing in the doorway was not just a wolf. It was a living shadow, nearly chest height to a man even on 4 legs. And filing out behind it came 10 more wolves rising to their feet, eyes burning with lethal intent. Kalen stepped onto the porch, the wood groaning under his weight. Saliva dripped from his jaws as he showed his teeth. This wasn't a wolf defending a rescuer. This was a king protecting what was his. Drake released Mira and stumbled back. You're a rogue, he spat, voice cracking. You're nothing but... Kalen lunged, not at his throat. He seized Drake's forearm, the one that had been holding Mira, and with a sound that cut through the wind, he snapped the bone. Drake screamed and lurched backward, clutching his arm, eyes filled with a terror that went beyond pain. The 2 other enforcers shifted and tried to flank the black wolf. It was a mistake. Eli, now a gray wolf, launched from the door and sent one tumbling into the deep snow below the porch. Cade cut off the second before he could run. Kalen advanced on Drake with a grind that vibrated in every chest present. Ugh. Don't kill him! The voice was barely a whisper, nearly lost in the wind. Kalen stopped. Mira was sitting in the snow where she'd fallen, trembling, eyes wide. She wasn't looking at him with gratitude. She was looking at him with the same fear she'd had for Drake. Something in his chest flinched. He stepped back. He stood over Drake and looked down at him. One last absolute warning. Then the bones cracked. He shifted. The transformation was savage and wet, the sound of it unnatural in the quiet aftermath. The black fur retreated. Human skin emerged. Steam rose from his bare shoulders in the frozen air. He stood 6'4", completely unashamed of it. His body was a map of old scars and hard muscle. His black hair was damp, falling over eyes that burned like molten gold. Drake looked up. A recognition swept his face, draining it bloodless. The king, he stammered. Run, said Kalen. His voice was deep and final, leaving no room for anything. Tell Randall that if his wolves come near this cabin again, I will burn his territory down to the stone. Drake didn't need to be told twice. He scrambled up, shifted with a limping crack, and bolted into the trees. His 2 battered companions fled with him. Silence fell over the clearing. Kalen turned slowly. The command left his face completely, replaced by something raw and urgent. He walked down the porch steps, snow hissing against his hot skin, and crouched down in front of Mira. "I'm sorry," she was saying, pressing back against a tree, eyes on the ground. "I didn't know you were people. I thought you were just injured wolves. I don't have permission to shelter shifters. Please don't—" "Mira." She went still. He knew her name. He'd heard Drake say it. He knelt in the snow directly in front of her, making himself smaller, trying to close the distance between monster and man. "Look at me," he said quietly. "Omegas don't make eye contact with alphas," she whispered. "It's Silverblood law." "Silverblood law," he said, his voice rough with something he wasn't entirely controlling. "Doesn't apply to me. And it doesn't apply to you anymore." He reached out slowly and tucked her hair back from her face. "You saved us," he said. "I would tear out my own heart before I let anything hurt you." She raised her eyes. His were the same gold she had seen in the wolf. And they weren't angry. They were reverent. A voice broke the moment from the porch. Sailai, now in human form, tall and blonde, wrapped in the oversized coat Mira had worn earlier, tossed a blanket down. Kalen wrapped it around his waist, and without asking, lifted Mira into his arms. "Put me down," she said weakly, one hand pressing against his chest, which was approximately the density of reinforced granite. "Your flank, you're still healing." "You're freezing," he said, already carrying her back over the threshold. "We're going inside." As he stepped through the door, she looked back at the 10 other wolves, all shifting now, all filling her tiny cabin with the sight of large, battered, very naked men, groaning as they stretched back into human shape. "Oh God," she said, covering her eyes. "I don't have enough clothes for this." Kalen made a sound she didn't expect, a short, rusty laugh. And something that hadn't come from him in years. "Don't worry about clothes," he said. "We have bigger problems to solve." Chapter 4. The Cabin After. The cabin was absurdly small for 12 adults, but the mood had shifted from desperate survival to a strange, tense domesticity. The fire roared. Broth was heating on the stove. Mira tried to retreat into the kitchen corner and was gently, firmly redirected to her one chair. "Please sit," insisted Cade, the beta, wearing her spare sweatpants comically taut around his calves and a dish towel over his shoulders. "You've done enough." She sat on her crooked stool and watched how these strangers moved through her tiny home. Efficient, even half-dressed and wounded. Built for controlled lethality. Kalen was the only one not moving. He settled on the floor near her feet, refusing a chair, and simply watched her. He had found an old curtain and wrapped it around himself like a toga. Somehow, he still looked like he owned the continent. "Why did they ban you?" he asked. The room went quiet. Mira looked at her hands. "I couldn't shift." A pause. "My wolf never appeared in Silverblood. If you don't shift by your teens, you're a drain on pack resources." She felt the tears threatening and refused them. "Randall said I was bad luck. Said an Omega without a wolf is just a human with a target on her back." A low growl came from Kalen's throat, involuntary. "You dragged 11 warriors through a blizzard," he said, voice tight. "You cleaned wolfsbane from my blood. You faced down an enforcer to protect strangers." His gold eyes burned. "You have more wolf in you than that entire pack combined." "It doesn't matter now," she said. "Once Drake tells Randall you're here, he'll come with his full force. You need to leave before—" "Let him come," Kalen said. "You don't understand." She stood up, agitated. "Randall has 40 wolves. You're hurt." She looked at him with wide, frightened eyes. "You don't have weapons." Eli, standing near the stove, let out a sound that was almost, a laugh. "Miss Mira," he said, "with respect, we are the weapons." Kalen rose to his full height, stepping close enough that his shadow swallowed her completely. He reached up and gently moved a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch sent an electric current down her spine that curled her toes inside her boots. "Mira," he said. Do you know who I am?" She shook her head. "Drake called you king, but that's just a title for—" "My name is Kalen Dusk," he said. She frowned. The name tugged at something. Dusk. Like the Dusk dynasty. The ruling family of the Central Continent. The name whispered with fear across every territory. Her lips parted. "You're the Alpha King." "The same," he said. I gave you broth from a dirty cup," she said, horrified. "The best thing I've tasted in years," he said quietly, stepping closer. "Because you were there." The air between them turned electric. His pack suddenly found intense interest in the ceiling beams. His scent hit her, deep and warm, and something under it that she couldn't name, but that made her wolf, the wolf she didn't have, stir. "Why are you looking at me like that?" she whispered. Before he could answer, a rhythmic sound cut through the wind. Whoomp. 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 Helicopter blades. Kalen moved to the window. His expression shifted to something authoritative, precise. "That's my rescue team." He turned to Mira. "Pack your things." "What?" "Everything you own. Anything that matters to you." He crossed to her and put both hands on her shoulders. The heat of his palms sank through to her bones. "You're coming with me." "I can't. I'm a banished Omega. I can't go to a palace." He leaned forward until his lips almost brushed her ear. "You're the woman who saved the king," he murmured. "From this moment, you are under my personal protection. Anyone who wants to reach you goes through my body first." He pulled back, holding her eyes. "Besides," he said, something dangerously quiet in his voice, "we have a debt to collect from Randall, and I prefer to collect debts in front of an audience." Chapter 5. The Reckoning. The throne room of the Obsidian Palace was designed to make people feel small. 15-meter ceilings, black marble pillars veined with gold, and at the far end, on a raised platform, the onyx throne. Kalen occupied it like it had been built specifically around him. One elbow on the armrest, expression that of a man choosing, specifically, to look bored. Eli and Cade flanked the steps in full gala uniform, hands resting on ceremonial sword pommels, though everyone present knew they preferred their claws. The great doors opened. Alpha Randall of the Silver Blood Pack. Randall walked in, heavyset, thinning hair, an expensive suit that couldn't quite disguise the sweat already forming on his collar, and he walked with the swagger of a man convincing himself he was confident. Behind him, Drake with his arm in a sling and 2 advisors. Randall hadn't seen Mira yet. She was seated in the shadowed alcove to the throne's right, behind a translucent screen. She could see everything. He couldn't see her. Her heart hammered. Randall stopped before the platform and swept into a deep bow. "Your Majesty, we are honored by your summons. It is a privilege to be in the Obsidian Palace." Kalen didn't smile. He pressed his cheek against his fist and watched Randall with half-lidded predator eyes. "Rise, Randall," he said softly. "I hear I owe you my life." Randall swelled. "We did what any loyal Alpha would do, my king. When we heard the explosion in the mountains, I deployed my best trackers immediately. Drake led the team." "Fascinating." Kalen tilted his head. "Tell me, how exactly did you find us? The storm was blinding." "It was difficult," Randall said smoothly. "Drake followed the Wolfsbane scent trail. We found the rebels who'd ambushed you. Fierce battle, Your Majesty. We drove them off and held the perimeter until your rescue team could land." In the alcove, Mira pressed her hand over her mouth. The audacity. They hadn't fought anyone. They'd come to terrorize a banished girl. "I see," said Kalen, his eyes moving to Drake and his sling. "War wound." Drake's forehead was glistening. "Yes, Your Majesty. One of the rebels, big one, nearly tore it off." Eli, standing on the steps, made a sound that could have been a cough or a barely contained laugh. "Heroes," Kalen said flatly. "Is then I suppose you also found the cabin. Randall blinked. The cabin? The trapper's hut, where my men and I were recovering. Ah, yes. Randall nodded vigorously. We searched it thoroughly, found it empty. The only person known to be living in that sector was a banished Omega, a nothing. He shrugged. She'd likely succumbed to the cold long before we arrived. Tragic. Likely succumbed to the cold. Kalen rose from the throne. Slowly. He descended the steps, one at a time, each footfall on the marble like a gunshot. He stopped directly in front of Randall and looked down at him. Succumbed to the cold, he repeated. His voice had dropped to something dangerous and quiet. So she's dead. I'm afraid so, said Randall, attempting to look grieved. Nature is cruel to the weak. Nature is cruel, Kalen agreed. Liars are crueler. Randall went rigid. Kalen turned his head toward the alcove. Mira. She stepped out. The reaction was immediate. Randall's eyes went to her, past the blue silk, past the clean skin and gleaming hair, past everything that was different, and landed on her eyes. The pale violet eyes he had watched walk away into the snow 4 months ago. Impossible, he breathed. You're dead. Very much alive, Alpha, she said. Her voice trembled only slightly. Her chin didn't. She crossed the floor and took her place beside Kalen. The moment their hands touched, the tension in Kalen's jaw released. This, said Kalen, his voice rising to fill the vast room, is the woman you called a nothing. She dragged 11 members of my royal guard through a blizzard. She cleaned wolfsbane from my blood. He pointed at Drake. While your enforcer was attempting to assault her. Drake went to his knees, sobbing. I didn't know it was you, sire. I swear I didn't know. You knew she was alone, Kalen said. The words were quiet and absolute. That should have been enough. He turned to Randall. Randall was shaking so hard his teeth were audible. You lied to your king, said Kalen. You claimed glory for acts you didn't commit. You abused a member of your pack. He leaned close to Randall's ear. And you tried to harm my mate. The word hung in the hall like thunder. Mate. Mira looked at him sharply. He hadn't said that word before. Not to her. Randall dropped to his knees. She's a wolfless Omega. Defective. She can't be. She has more heart in her smallest finger than your entire bloodline combined, Kalen said. He looked at Eli. You strip them of rank. Cold and final. Drake is imprisoned for assault on the crown. And Randall. He turned back to the trembling Alpha. Do you like the cold, Randall? Do you enjoy banishing people to frozen wastelands with nothing? Please, mercy! I'll give you the same mercy you gave her. Kalen looked at his guards. Take him to the northern border. Nothing but the clothes he's wearing. If he survives the winter, he keeps his pathetic life. He paused. Nature is cruel to the weak. The guards swept in, the doors slammed. Silence. Mira was shaking. Tears ran down her face, not fear, not grief. Something that had been locked inside her for years, finally breaking loose. Kalen turned to her. Every trace of the king was gone from his expression, replaced by something bare and desperate. I'm sorry, he said, coming to her. I should have told you about the mate bond before. I didn't want to frighten you. She looked up at him. The man who had just dismantled her tormentors and handed her the world. You called me your queen, she whispered. Because you are, he said, taking her face in his hands. If you'll have me. Chapter 6. The White Wolf. The grand hall, after the guards had gone, was silent and still. Mira stood in the center, Kalen's hands gentle on her face. She thought about the frozen cabin, the empty cans, the 4 months of surviving on borrowed time, convinced that she was the defective thing they'd all said she was. And she thought about his eyes. gold and warm and looking at her like she was the first real thing he'd seen in years. "I don't want to go anywhere," she said softly. "I've spent my whole life being rejected. I want to be home." Kalen exhaled, a long breath that sounded like it had been held for days. He pulled her close, pressing his face into her hair. "You are home, Mira. You are my home." He tilted her chin up and kissed her. It wasn't tentative. It was the collision of two people who had been circling each other from opposite edges of the same gravity, certain, desperate, and long overdue. The moment their lips met with full intention, a shockwave of energy moved through the room. The chandeliers shuddered. The torches flared. Mira stumbled back, gripping her own chest. Something was burning, not with pain, but with power surging up from the base of her spine. "What's happening?" Kalen stepped back, eyes wide. He breathed in sharply. "Your scent is changing." The heat inside her became a roar. "It hurts," she gasped, dropping to one knee. Kalen was beside her instantly. "Don't fight it, Mira. Let it come. This is your wolf." "I don't have a wolf." "You were never wolfless," he said fiercely, holding her shoulders. "You were sleeping. A normal pack couldn't wake what's inside you, because what's inside you is not normal." He looked into her eyes. She needed a king's power to wake. She needed this. The pain crested. Mira threw her head back and screamed, a sound that became something else entirely as it rose, transforming mid-air into a howl that shattered the nearest windows. The air blurred. Where the small, frightened girl had been, a wolf now stood. But not gray, not brown, not any ordinary shade. White, pure, blinding white, like fresh snow on a mountain ridge at midnight. Her coat caught the torchlight and scattered it like scattered diamonds. She was enormous, nearly as large as Kalen himself. And her eyes were burning violet. Kalen stood motionless. The royal guard gathered in the shadows, dropped to one knee in unison. "White Wolf," Eli breathed, barely audible. "The Moon Chosen. The legend—" Mira, the wolf she was, looked at her own paws. Felt the power in her muscles like electricity waiting to be used. She was strong. She was boundless. She looked at Kalen. He was smiling, a full, open, joyful smile that didn't have a single piece of the king in it. He stepped back, let his own wolf take over. The massive black shape that filled the far side of the hall like night itself. He lowered his great head in a bow. The Black King and the White Queen, night and snow. They circled each other in the throne room, shadow chasing light, light chasing shadow, and when he pressed his muzzle to her neck, the mate bond settled. Permanent. Unbreakable. His thoughts warmed her mind like sunlight coming through a window. "Mine," his voice resonated. "Yours," she answered, half a heartbeat later. Epilogue. 3 years later. "Mom! Mom!" Two small fur tornadoes came skidding around the corner of the palace's east corridor, tiny paws slipping on polished marble. I caught the nearest one half a second before she took out an antique vase worth more than my old cabin. "Elia, Dorian," I said, trying to sound stern. "How many times? No running in wolf form inside." 2 3-year-olds shifted back into children and looked up at me with expressions so perfectly innocent I nearly broke character. "Sorry." "Mom," said Elia, white-haired, violet-eyed, already calculating exactly how sorry she needed to sound. "Dad said it was urgent," added Dorian solemnly, his black hair sticking up in every direction. I sighed. "Where is he?" "Balcony," they said together. I found Kalen on our private balcony, watching the sunset paint the city below in rose and amber. Simple white shirt, sleeves pushed up, dark hair tousled by the mountain wind. 3 years in, somehow still the most terrifying, and the most real thing I had ever seen in the same breath. "The children say it's urgent," I said, stepping out beside him. He turned with that smile, the one kept only for me. "It is." He reached into his pocket and produced a small carved wooden box. Old, engraved with symbols I'd learned to read in the palace library. What is this? Open it. Inside was an old silver key, tarnished with age. That's the key to the cabin, he said softly. The original. We found it during the renovation. He lifted it from the box and hung it on a thin silver chain, then fastened it around my neck. So you never forget where we came from. I touched it, throat tight. How could I forget? Never, he said, pulling me close. He pressed his lips to my forehead, and I felt through our bond the warmth that lived in him like a constant, the safety of something that would not move. That night, he said quietly, when you found me in the snow, you didn't just save a wolf. He met my eyes. You saved a king, and I gave you a kingdom in return. No, I whispered. I looked through the open doors to where Elia was trying to teach her brother to chase a feather, both of them laughing in the golden light. You gave me something better. I touched the key at my throat. Everything had started in a snowstorm. 11 dying wolves, and a girl who didn't know she was saving her own destiny. And now we were writing the rest of it together. The sun finished its descent over Aurelia, painting the peaks in gold. Somewhere in the mountains, snow fell soft and quiet on a small, renovated cabin, a monument to the night everything changed. And in the obsidian palace, surrounded by warmth and the sound of her children's laughter, I was exactly where I was supposed to be. They banished her because she had no wolf. They were afraid of the wrong thing. She didn't lack a wolf. She was waiting for the only power strong enough to wake one. And when she found it, she became a legend.